Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Half Pint session. Well, today's interview is going to be a delight because I can't quite remember how this book came on my radar. It was something on the internet, but I found it, picked up a copy, thoroughly enjoyed it, and then went and looked up the author and found out that she had lots of videos about telling people how to be better wives. So I naturally forwarded all of those to my wife, and she now loves me even more. But Tilly, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, would you mind just kicking things off, just telling us a little bit about yourself? Who are you?
Yes, absolutely. So I am the wife of a pastor here in Middle Tennessee, very, very small town, about an hour outside of Nashville. I grew up in the Nashville area. Family was in kind of the music world. And I moved out here as a new believer. I was actually converted in this little town, in this little church under a biblical counselor out here, and then moved here to be in a healthy church and just I need a lot of help, a lot of input. My husband at the time was a pastoral intern at the church. We had zero interest in each other, but a friendship grew up around books. You were sharing something kind of similar before we started recording. And now
Although, to be fair, my wife had the hots for me from the beginning.
Yeah, she just immediately. Well, if that is not the case, try reading aloud to them because sometimes it works. Or giving books to them, which is what Justin was doing with me. He was given a lot of people books. Actually, it was just what he did. But in my case, I thought it meant he was interested, and eventually he was. So we have 4 children, 10 and under. And I'm homeschooling them out here, and we are loving the country life. Really, we're still at the same church that he's been part of all these years, and that I was saved in. And about, I guess, 10 years ago, I wrote my first book, which was about envy, also heavily inspired by Lewis. Had another book in between there, and then year and a half ago, this book, My Dear Hemlock, came out, and that's been a delight. I've gotten to meet a lot of Lewis lovers doing interviews around this book. And the wife stuff that you were referencing, that just cracked me up that you stumbled into that after the Hemlock thing, because that's new. That's kind of new material that I'm kind of workshopping right now in real time on something called Instagram that I've recently jumped back into and am suffering through. So yeah, that's my life.
Well, my first question is, with 4 children, how on earth are you writing books?
Yeah.
Because I have 3 and a full-time job, but my wife is a stay-at-home mother, and we are just about holding it together at the moment. So
Right.
How do you even find time to do this?
Right. Mostly, I know that the first one, I had no children when I wrote most of that book. So I feel like if I was to suddenly decide to start writing now in this season of my life, I can't imagine how that would go. But I do get up early a lot. That is something that's gotten me through some books. And then my husband is a pastor, so he takes Mondays off, and sometimes that's a writing day for me. You just work around, but mostly you get tricked into it is what happens. And it's a lot like having children, where you'll have a baby, and right after you have that baby, you're like, never again. And then somebody with the
Then
book,
somebody
it's the
hands
same
you
thing.
another baby,
That's
and it's
right.
like, this is so cute. I want
Somebody
another.
makes googly eyes at you, and you end up with more children. Or with the books, you say, I'll never write another book. I've said that after every book. I'll never do this again. And then an idea comes along, and you're in it before you can help yourself. So yeah.
Well, then the next question is, then what's your background been with Lewis? If he has been in your past throughout, when did you encounter him? What role did he play in your own journey?
Right. Yeah. I didn't know much Lewis as a younger person. I think it was I became a believer in my early 20s, and the week that I was saved, I was being given some reading material as part of that process. And one of the very early books I was handed was, I think, just Mere Christianity, and then also Till We Have Faces. I read maybe the week that I was saved, I read Till We Have Faces, which is such an interesting first book for someone to hand you of his. I had not read the Chronicles until I had children. So that was my first time through several of the Chronicles. I may have read a couple of them, but the first walk through the entire and re-walking and re-listening and all, it's been many times now. But so early in working on the material for that first book about envy, I was very inspired by The Weight of Glory, the essay, and it produced this kind of train of thought around the borrowed glories that other people wear, and the pain of envy being your encounter with the glory that another man has that you wish was yours. And that the reason why envy is so powerful is because the glory is so powerful. And that was all a line of thought that came directly out of that essay by Lewis. So I just feel like the relationship between my writing and reading Lewis just seems to continue, so.
And you seem to have put yourself in the orbit of certain people. I've seen that Joe Rigney's been on your podcast a few times. I immediately, when I discovered your podcast, I went down and downloaded each one of those because I knew that was going to be good. He's been on the show also a couple of times.
Oh, yes. Okay, great. Yeah. So Rigney is a very good friend of my podcast partner, Abigail. They were in the same church for a while, in the same community for a while. But he also was part of the reason why I connected with Abigail in the first place, I believe, because he had read that envy book and been very kind about it. And he was the first real author that had given me a real blurb for that book, where I didn't have a lot of contacts in writing at all. So I was new, and it just meant a lot. You know how you remember those people who gave you early help and feedback, and he was one of those people. So.
Yeah, I still remember Justin Brierley when he gave us a shout out on his podcast, Premier Unbelievable, and he suddenly saw a spike in listenership.
Yeah, right. And you were like, thank you. Thank you, sir. Well, I have been on, since you reached out, this is how I find new podcasts, is people invite me on their show, and then I go listen to a couple episodes, and I listened to all of the episodes you guys did on Paralandra, because I was in the middle of a reread, and I was just primed, and I was about to hit the road. So I listened to many hours of Paralandra discussion from you guys and loved it, just totally loved it. So I've recommended your podcast to others since then.
Wonderful. Well, we have to reciprocate. What is your podcast called, and what is it about?
Right. It's called Home Buyers, and, kind of pitched to mothers at home who are keeping the home fires burning in wartime. So, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I think we've done enough run-up. Let's talk about this little number. So, my dear Hemlock, so you are adopting the Screwtape mechanism of a senior demon writing to a junior demon. What made you adopt it for this book?
Yeah, so it began as a series of blog posts back when I had a live blog, which is not there anymore. But I did maybe 4 or 5 pieces in this voice with this character, this Madame Hoaxrat character. And it all started with a piece that I wanted to write about women who believe they've married beneath them, and how it was a phenomenon that I felt like I kind of had seen, but it was hard to describe without particulars, and it was like, how can you write a straight prose piece about something like this? And I couldn't see a way to do it. And so the kind of fictionalizing, where you have a fictional couple where you can create real details, I guess, that kind of illustrate what you're talking about. I just found it to be really, really a handy device. And then also, you've got the extra sort of power of, oh, well, I don't want to see the demons get their way in my life. And I enjoyed that from early on too. But I think one of the main things that was helpful at the beginning was just the freedom to fictionalize nonfiction and get a lot of illustrative power out of that. So,
yeah, Lewis uses the epistolary mechanism a ton in his work, and I can see why. For all of those reasons that you've just said, it gives you some freedom. You get to protect the innocent and guilty, and you can be much more pointed, particularly when you get to use the voice of a demon. I mean, there were some lines in here, because for people that weren't party to our conversation just before we hit recording, I read this to my wife because I figured, okay, this is a girl's Screwtape book. I need to be reading this to my wife. And there are some lines in it said by the senior demon that are absolutely savage and funny in that wonderful way. It's like I feel personally attacked by that, but there's a spoonful of sugar around it to help the medicine go down as I'm trying to learn the lesson that is being communicated.
Right, the sort of padding of the fictionalization, but yeah, and it's certainly it's a voice that I could never use as myself. So, yeah.
Well, I said that this is a girl Screwtape book. So would you mind just filling out the setup for this particular book? Who are the demons and who is the patient?
Yeah, so it's an imitation Screwtape, book with a senior demon writing to a demon who's new to the job, and the demons' names are Madame Hoaxrot and Hemlock. And the patient that they're discussing is a woman living today. You catch up with her as she's a new convert, a newlywed, and you follow her through her life into middle age. So you get actually more years with this patient than in Screwtape, which is Screwtape. It's just a couple years. Seems like pretty short-lived guy who dies at the end of the book. And here,
spoiler warning.
Yeah, spoiler if you haven't read Screwtape, it's too late for you anyway. But here I think I wanted to dip into some of the things to do with marriage, to do with motherhood, and even to do with kind of aging and a few things kind of later in life. And that's why I thought it would be helpful to spread out the timeline of this book a little further than just a couple of years. So I was also thinking it would be nice to see her mature, where you see some of the sort of nastiness of her early struggles mellow and mature, where she's actually growing and you can actually see it.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you come back to Eustace in the later Narnian Chronicles, and he's not such a jerk. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great mug, by the way.
Yeah, this is actually my husband's mug, but we all drink out of it.
But the different territory that you got to go into in this book, I've really enjoyed. And it's kind of funny because I've actually already interviewed someone this season who wrote their own girls Screwtape book. But I would say it was for a much younger girl, the Sincerely Stoneheart, that was what that was called. And I think that was geared towards younger women. And literally yesterday, I got an email from our Sunday visitor. They've got their own Screwtape book specifically about motherhood. So
interesting.
It's when
it rains, it pours.
Well, exactly. But I really liked the fact that you got to go into marriage, which is something that the original Screwtape letters didn't do much at all. There's a little bit about their relationship, and as well as motherhood. And like seemingly everyone else, I also have tried my hand at writing a few Screwtape letters. Mine were called the Bogwash Epistles, and it was because I wanted to focus on expand one chapter in Lois's when the patient goes to church. It's like, oh, this is a book's worth of everything that happens when you go through those doors. We're recording on Ash Wednesday, so this is the day when all liturgical Christians have all of their friends go, oh, you got a little something on, yeah. That's what you have to put up with all day. It's fine, but it allows you to fill out and explore those areas of things that you kind of want to say, and things, dangers that you've experienced in your own life, where you've seen either other people or very often yourself sort of go wrong. So let's look at some of those issues that you explore. What are some of the ones? You already mentioned the woman who thinks that she's married beneath herself. My wife obviously has, but I can imagine that not always being the case.
There are several chapters just on the spiritual disciplines early in the book, because you're dealing with kind of a new Christian. So just things like the basics of prayer and why we want to prevent it, and what are the means of learning to pray that she might stumble into. And marriage, just basics of like how rudeness escalates inside of a marriage to hatred eventually, if you let it go on long enough. There's a social media chapter that talks about time. as
And
a,
yes,
yeah.
I'd like you to talk about that one because that went in a very different direction than the one that I was expecting. I was expecting your demon to be saying, "It's like, oh, wonderful! Well, they've got this social media. Let it be just filled with envy
Hmm.
and pollution of the eyes and all the stuff that's down there." But
Right.
you went for time.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think this is just the way that I feel about social media, that is the thing it has stolen the most from me personally, is the demon is saying, yes, of course, we do love to use it for this and that. We've obviously there have been victories in the pornography department, who are rejoicing endlessly over the easiest job on the force, But we know that the true victory in the screen age is victory over time. The human beings are meant to live in time like a road that they walk on one step after another. Sometimes the road feels slow and laborious when they're doing something unpleasant or difficult. Sometimes it feels fast, but they can only live in one moment after another. And that's how they were made to live as creatures. But you and I in the screen, we invite them to float up off the road of time and pass down the road of time to where they know not. They don't remember when they floated up off of it. They don't remember when they got on their phone. They just know that they've been relieved from the burden of time to the point that even pleasant activities are no longer attractive to them. And then the demon kind of implies that this is a little bit similar to the demon's own relationship with time, that they've rejected the god of time, and now they live kind of a disoriented existence, which that's purely a flight. I don't know if that's true. I've always wondered, how do you end up with people in rebellion that they can't, when they must know that they're going to lose? And I also have experienced addictions and addiction cycles, and I know how disorienting those are in time, where you want time to speed up, but you don't know when you want it to speed up too. You just know that you're restless and that time is hard. And so a good old fashioned drug addiction, is not unlike the addiction to the phone. So yeah, that was what I wanted to communicate in that chapter.
And you allude to a chapter in the original Screwtape, and I remember when we went through that series in that particular chapter, when Screwtape is talking about just keep the guy busy. It doesn't even have to be anything
Yes,
that he's
right.
enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
And I even remember commenting as we were talking to that, oh my goodness, this just sounds like social media.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just hadn't quite put all of those pieces together that you
Right.
did in that chapter. And
Right. You bring him to the end of his life, and he'll finally realize he did neither what he ought nor what he liked. And yeah, the
but
gentle
spent most
road
of his time
to
doing
oblivion.
this.
Yes, I know. And I know when you're reading that, you're just like, oh my goodness, what was he worried about? Because what would he think now? But yeah.
I definitely got the impression that as you were going through this, you were having fun. I would actually say I think these letters are funnier than Lewis's. It's like it's like when the demon says, oh, "I'm just having a bout of ennui. I'll finish this another time." It's like,
Yes. Yeah, I just the thing about this female demon character is just, I wanted to make her the kind of worst of the worst of all female. I don't know, just the worst things you might find in a woman, but escalated. And yeah, the idea that she's just bored. I also like that she sort of will talk trash about the other demons in a uniquely feminine way. I just
yeah, pretty savage. And I was curious because Lewis says that he wrote the Screwtape letters fairly easily, but he enjoyed nothing less. It was like, oh, it's all dirt and grit.
Right.
And pretty much every single person I've spoken to who has done something like this went, that wasn't my experience. I had a ball. Are we just not as good as Lewis? Is that it?
Probably not as holy as he is. I know that with him, he dove right in, wrote them all out in one go in a pretty short period of time. Isn't that right?
Mm-hmm.
So my experience was different in that I dipped in and out for a couple months, maybe in the first few letters, left the whole thing to the side for a couple years, and then came back to make it into a book. So I had plenty of breaks and was always pretty fresh when I came in to look at it again. I did have that experience when I read the audiobook. I had that feeling of like, oh, I can't talk like this anymore. I can't think that, I can't read this anymore. I'm done. So I kind of understand a little better what he was describing, but not in the writing.
One area I also wanted you to speak to was on the chapter on female friendship. And that's because Pints with Jack actually began life as an in-person book club.
Great.
And we were reading through The Four Loves. And particularly at that time, we were very female heavy in the group. And I think actually when we did the chapter of friendship, it was just myself and Matt, and I think maybe 8 other girls.
Oh,
And
wow.
all of them were saying, it's like, this isn't my experience of friendship. What Lewis is describing here is it's not sort of how I think about friendship at all. And then Matt was just charging. It's like, oh, this is absolutely spot on. I don't know what all of you are talking about.
Yeah.
So seeing you tackle this particular subject, as soon as I saw the title, I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. So how do you parse that out? What do you think are some of the differences and distinct temptations between the genders when it comes to friendship?
Yeah. Okay. Well, on the subject of the four loves, though, and the women not understanding Lewis's sort of take on friendship, I've had a couple conversations about this in the last maybe year, where we've sort of concluded that female friendships are more face to face than male friendships, and there is much more overlap with us in the way that a sort of loverish orientation it's just the female orientation to relationship is, let's talk about the relationship. Like the existence of the friendship itself is such a big deal that we need to spend at least some time kind of working over it, identifying what it is, DTRs all the time. And that's a uniquely feminine approach, which I still would say is a liability a lot of the time. I think that it's a tendency that can bring a lot of ill health to female friendship. And that
I think it's the strength. I think it's the strength, because women can become friends much quicker than men generally, I would say, insofar as that as long as there is some kind of emotional exchange or sharing of life, that itself can be what Lewis calls the matrix, the framework in which that friendship takes place. With guys, it's much more common that it has to be something out there, something else that we can both look at together. Whereas with women, it seems to be that the act of sharing one another's lives, that can be the framework in which the friendship then develops and grows.
Right. And they're
just
more
simply
likely,
from the shared lives.
Right. And they're much more likely to be able to have the food of the relationship be, let's talk about what's happening with you. How are your other relationships? Let me help you with those. But I will also say that it can, if that's the only food of the friendship among women, even, it can become a little cannibalistic, I think, like where the relationship is trying to feed on itself and it doesn't have enough food from outside of that to keep it healthy. So I guess I've just noticed it really improves my friendships when I work on a project with another woman. And I feel like it takes a lot of pressure off of the sort of DTR element in the relationship, and it makes it more fun. And to me, it makes me less self-conscious about who am I to this person and who are they to me? Am I important enough in their life? I don't remember what all I said, honestly, in that female friendship chapter in this book, but I know that a lot of it had to do with women deciding who is the more important person in this relationship. Am I the superior or is she the superior? And then if so, the temptations are different depending on where you kind of sense you are in that relationship. If she's a superior, then I'm extremely motivated to, drop other stuff to make time for her, to kind of climb the social ladder, of this relationship, because I've decided I really care about this person, what she thinks of me. Whereas the temptation, if you've pegged yourself as the superior in that relationship, then the temptations are different. Love, of course, that also, though, I was pretty deliberately trying to show that this is the way a very immature woman looks at relationships, and this is the way a demon looks at relationships. All relationships are either eat or be eaten. There's no such thing as true sacrificial love for a demon, so this is all she can understand, and this is how she interprets, even though, there's a lot of that in human relationship too, where it is this kind of, but again, I would just say
consuming of the same thing.
Right. That's right. And for a demon, that's what it is. That's what
Mm.
life is like. But that is not love. And I've hoped that a woman who has experienced true sacrificial love in her relationships reads a chapter like that and says, "Oh, I don't even know what you're talking about." I know that I have friends who are so pure in heart. They read that chapter and had no idea what it was about. So yeah.
Well, much like Lewis's book, yours also ends with the patient coming to their own end. I'm not going to spoil too many of the particular details about it, but would you mind speaking to a little bit as to how it's different from Lewis's ending?
Yes, I'm glad you brought it up because I don't mind it being spoiled. And it was very deliberate to kill the patient at the end of the book because I felt that it was the arc that Lewis had kind of created with his prototype. And I feel that killing the patient is necessary to show the glory and the triumph at the end of a book that's kind of a downer otherwise. um, and it just has a lot of, the dark underbelly. So I feel like it's the moment when the glory breaks through, in Lewis's book, certainly. But in my book, she's middle-aged, maybe 50s or 60s. She's still pretty young, and she gets cancer. And the reason I chose that particular way of her ending, of her end, was that it seemed like Lewis chose to kill his young man in an air raid in London at a time when that was the thing everyone was afraid of. And if I know women, I think one of the things women are afraid of is getting cancer and dying. I just think that's a common female worry, is that something's going to come and get me when I'm too young and not ready to go. I've had several women in my life in the last 5 years, middle-aged women who died of cancer in our church community, who were pillars of the community, the women that I want to be when I grow up. And watching them die was a glimpse of glory. And I wanted you to see that in this patient. So,
And I also found it a sort of a little insight into Lewis, because of course his own mother died of cancer at approximately that sort of age.
Right.
Well, no, we don't want to end on a downer. So do you have any thoughts for what you might be writing next?
Yes, I think it's going to be wife related. Some of the stuff that you saw online.
I'll pre-order it already.
Right. Well, yes, I'm in process of working on a proposal for that. So, yeah.
Wonderful. And if people would like to find out more about you or pick up a copy of the book, My Dear Hemlock, where should they go?
Yeah, you can find Hemlock pretty much just online where you buy books. I have a website that my brother-in-law just finished fixing up for me. It's just tillydillehay.com. So you can find new projects there. I think we're about to make available an apron that says "Not Today, Hoax Rot" embroidered on the front. If you're into that kind of thing. And then I am back on Instagram making corny videos for young wives. So you can find me there too.
To quote Kate Winslet in The Holiday, maybe I like corny. Maybe I need a little bit of corny in my life. Well, Tilly, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
And viewers, please join us again next time when we'll continue going further up and further in. Cheers.